Water is life? That's not just a phrase, it's biology. Your body is about 60% water, your brain 73%. You can survive weeks without food, but without water? 3 days, maybe 4 if you're lucky, and the temperature is merciful. Now picture this. You're in Texas, where summer heat regularly pushes past 100 degrees, where droughts aren't rare events but recurring nightmares, and where the next water crisis isn't a question of if, but when. The infrastructure is aging, the aquifers are depleting, and climate patterns are shifting in ways that make the 2011 drought look like a warm-up. If you think the government or your local utility will save you when the taps run dry, you're gambling with your family's survival. So before we go any further, if you're serious about being ready for what's coming, hit that subscribe button right now. This channel exists because most people won't tell you the hard truths about survival. But we will. Texas has always been a state of extremes. Floods one year, droughts the next. But something has changed in the last 2 decades. The droughts are lasting longer, hitting harder, and the recovery periods are getting shorter. The 2011 drought was the worst single-year drought in Texas history, with some areas receiving less than a quarter of their normal rainfall. Lakes dropped to record lows, cattle died by the thousands, and entire communities watched their wells go dry. That drought cost the state $7.6 billion in agricultural losses alone. But here's what they don't tell you. The aquifers never fully recovered. The Ogallala Aquifer, which supplies water to the Texas Panhandle and much of the Great Plains, is being drained 50 times faster than it can recharge. Some estimates suggest that parts of it could be effectively dry within 25 years. The Edwards Aquifer, which serves San Antonio and millions of people across central Texas, faces similar pressures from overpumping and reduced rainfall. These aren't scare tactics. These are documented geological facts from the U.S. Geological Survey and Texas Water Development Board. Let's talk about what happens when a drought really takes hold in Texas. First, the reservoirs start dropping. Lakes like Travis and Buchanan, which supply water to Austin and surrounding areas, can lose 60 to 70% of their capacity during severe drought. When that happens, water restrictions kick in. No watering lawns, limited car washing, shorter showers. That's phase 1, the polite phase, where everyone pretends it's just temporary. Phase 2 is when things get real. Wells start failing in rural areas because the water table drops below the pump depth. Small towns that depend on single-source water supplies run completely dry and have to truck in water at enormous cost. Farmers watch their crops wither and their livestock suffer because there's simply not enough water to sustain both. Agricultural production collapses, which means food prices spike across the entire region. And here's the part that should terrify you. In phase 3, even major cities start rationing water. We've seen it happen in California, in South Africa, and it will happen in Texas if the next mega drought hits hard enough. The problem isn't just natural drought cycles, it's infrastructure failure compounded by population growth. Texas is one of the fastest growing states in the nation. More people means more demand on the same limited water resources. Many of the water treatment plants and distribution systems in Texas are 50 to 70 years old, built for populations half the size of what they serve today. Pipes leak, pumps fail, and during a crisis, these systems can't handle the surge in demand. In February 2021, when Winter Storm Uri hit Texas, it wasn't just the power grid that failed. Water systems across the state collapsed. Frozen pipes burst, treatment plants shut down, and millions of people were left without clean water for days or weeks. Now imagine that happening during a summer drought, when there's no water in the reservoirs to begin with. The chaos would be total. So what do you actually do to survive when the water stops flowing? The first and most critical step is storage. You need to store water now while it's still abundant and cheap. The standard recommendation is 1 gallon per person per day, but that's a bare minimum for drinking and basic hygiene. If you're planning to cook, clean, and maintain any semblance of normal life, you need 3 to 5 gallons per person per day. For a family of 4 preparing for a 30-day emergency, that's 360 to 600 gallons of stored water. That sounds like a lot, but it's achievable. You can use food-grade water barrels, stackable water bricks, or even cleaned-out 2-liter soda bottles. The key is rotation. Stored water doesn't last forever. You need to use and refill your supply every 6 months to keep it fresh. And don't forget to treat stored water with a small amount of unscented chlorine bleach, 8 drops per gallon, to prevent bacterial growth. But storage is only part of the solution. What happens when your stored water runs out and the drought is still raging? You need to know how to find and purify water from alternative sources. In Texas, that means understanding the landscape. If you live near a creek, river, or lake, you have a potential water source, but you must purify it before drinking. Surface water in Texas can contain bacteria like E. coli, parasites like Giardia and Cryptosporidium, and chemical contaminants from agricultural runoff. Boiling is the most reliable purification method. Bring water to a rolling boil for at least 1 minute, or 3 minutes if you're at higher elevations. If you can't boil, you need a quality water filter. Look for filters rated to remove bacteria and protozoa with a pore size of 0.1 microns or smaller. Popular brands like LifeStraw, Sawyer, and Katadyn offer portable filters that can process thousands of gallons. For long-term preparedness, consider a gravity-fed filter system like a Berkey, which can purify large quantities without electricity. Rain catchment is another option, especially if you have a roof and gutters. In Texas, rainfall is unpredictable, but when it does rain, it can be heavy. A single inch of rain on a 1,000 square foot roof produces about 600 gallons of water. You can capture this by directing your downspouts into barrels or tanks. Make sure the first flush of rain is diverted because it washes accumulated dirt, bird droppings, and debris off your roof. After that, the water is relatively clean but should still be filtered and treated before drinking. Some people install elaborate rainwater harvesting systems with pumps and filters, but even a simple barrel setup can provide valuable water for washing and irrigation during a drought. Let's talk about wells because many rural Texans depend on private wells for their water supply. If you have a well, you need to understand how deep it is and what happens if the water table drops. Shallow wells, those less than 50 feet deep, are the first to fail during drought because the water table falls below the pump intake. Deep wells can last longer, but they're not immune. The Ogallala aquifer in the Panhandle is dropping by 1 to 3 feet per year in some areas, which means even deep wells will eventually run dry. If you rely on a well, you need a backup plan. That might mean drilling a deeper well, installing a manual hand pump that can draw water even when the electric pump fails, or having a secondary water source entirely. Manual hand pumps are surprisingly effective and can draw water from depths up to 300 feet, though the deeper you go, the harder the pumping. They're an investment, typically costing $1,000 to $3,000 installed, but they're worth it if your well is your lifeline. What about water from swimming pools, hot tubs, or water heaters? These can be emergency sources, but they come with limitations. Pool water is heavily chlorinated, which actually makes it safer for drinking than you might think. You can use it with minimal additional treatment. However, pools also contain algicides and other chemicals that aren't meant for consumption. In a true emergency, you can filter and dilute pool water to make it drinkable, but it's not ideal for long-term use. Water heaters, on the other hand, hold 30 to 50 gallons of clean water that's perfectly safe to drink. Most people forget that their water heater is essentially a giant water storage tank. In an emergency, you can drain it by attaching a hose to the drain valve at the bottom. Just make sure to turn off the power or gas to the heater first and let the water cool. Now here's something they definitely don't tell you. Water conservation during a drought isn't just about shorter showers and turning off the tap while you brush your teeth. It's about radically rethinking how you use water in every aspect of your life. Flushing a toilet uses 1.6 to 7 gallons per flush, depending on the age of your toilet. That adds up fast. In a severe water shortage, you need to adopt the "if it's yellow, let it mellow" rule. Or better yet, switch to a composting toilet system. These systems use little to no water and convert human waste into compost over time. They're common in off-grid homes and can be a lifesaver when water is scarce. For washing, you can use the Navy shower method. Get wet, turn off the water, soap up, then rinse quickly. A Navy shower uses less than 3 gallons compared to 25 gallons for a typical shower. You can also reuse gray water, water from sinks, showers, and washing machines for irrigation or toilet flushing. Just make sure you're not using it on anything you plan to eat raw, and avoid gray water that contains harsh chemicals or detergents. Let's get into the hard reality of water and food production during a drought. If you're planning to grow your own food as part of your survival strategy, you need to understand how much water that requires. A vegetable garden can use anywhere from 1 to 2 inches of water per week, which translates to roughly 60 gallons per 100 square feet. Multiply that over a growing season, and you're looking at thousands of gallons. Traditional row gardening is incredibly water-intensive, which is why you need to shift to drought-tolerant techniques. Drip irrigation is far more efficient than overhead sprinklers, delivering water directly to plant roots and reducing evaporation loss by up to 50%. Mulching is equally critical. A thick layer of organic mulch around plants retains soil moisture and can reduce watering needs by 30 to 40%. Choose drought-resistant crops like okra, black-eyed peas, teepery beans, amaranth, and native squashes that evolved to thrive in hot, dry conditions. Avoid water-hungry plants like tomatoes, cucumbers, and leafy greens unless you have a reliable water source. Livestock management during drought is brutal. Cattle need 10 to 20 gallons of water per day depending on their size and the temperature. Horses need similar amounts. Chickens are more manageable at about half a gallon per bird per day, but that still adds up if you have a flock. During the 2011 drought, Texas ranchers sold off cattle in massive numbers because they couldn't afford to feed and water them. Some estimates say the state lost 500,000 head of cattle. If you're raising animals as part of your preparedness plan, you need to calculate your water requirements realistically and have a plan for what you'll do if water becomes scarce. That might mean reducing your herd, investing in more water storage, or finding alternative water sources like ponds or wells dedicated to livestock. Here's a reality check. Most people preparing for emergencies focus on firearms, food storage, and fuel, but they completely overlook water. Water is heavier and bulkier than almost any other prep item, which makes it inconvenient. A gallon of water weighs 8.3 pounds. 55 gallons weighs over 450 pounds. You can't just stash it in a closet and forget about it. You need dedicated space, proper containers, and a rotation system. But here's the thing, without water, all your other preps are worthless. You can't cook your stored rice and beans without water. You can't maintain hygiene, treat injuries, or stay hydrated in the Texas heat. Water is the foundation of survival, and if you don't prioritize it now, you will pay the price later. Let's talk about community and water security, because this is where things get dangerous. When water becomes scarce, human behavior changes. We've seen it in every major drought and water crisis throughout history. People get desperate. Neighbors start accusing each other of wasting water. Fights break out over access to wells and creeks. In extreme cases, communities fracture entirely as people prioritize their own survival over collective well-being. There are documented cases from the California droughts where people drilled illegal wells, stole water from irrigation systems, and even siphoned from fire hydrants. In Texas, where property rights and self-reliance are deeply ingrained, a water crisis could escalate quickly. You need to think about how you'll protect your water supply and whether you'll share with neighbors or keep it secured. These are uncomfortable questions, but they're necessary. The best approach is to build relationships now with like-minded people in your area who are also preparing. A community that prepares together has a far better chance of surviving than isolated individuals hoarding resources and defending them with force. Water rights in Texas are complex and often misunderstood. Texas operates under a dual system of water rights: riparian rights for surface water and the rule of capture for groundwater. Riparian rights mean that if you own land adjacent to a river or stream, you have the right to use that water, but you can't unreasonably impede the flow or deprive downstream users. Groundwater, on the other hand, follows the rule of capture, which essentially means if you can pump it from beneath your land, it's yours, even if that depletes your neighbor's well. This system has led to massive overpumping and conflicts, especially in rural areas. If you're buying land with water access in mind, you need to research the water rights thoroughly. Don't assume that a creek running through your property means you have unlimited access. And if you're drilling a well, understand that local groundwater conservation districts may impose pumping limits, especially during drought. Let's address the elephant in the room. What happens if the water crisis is so severe that society starts to break down? In a true collapse scenario, water becomes the most valuable commodity, more precious than gold or ammunition. People will migrate toward water sources, which means rivers, lakes, and functional wells become magnets for desperate populations. If you live near a major water source, you need to think about security. That doesn't necessarily mean turning your property into a fortress, but it does mean being aware of who's around you and having a plan for controlling access. Some preppers advocate for discretion, keeping your water sources hidden and not advertising your preparedness. Others believe in building defensive capabilities to protect what they have. The right approach depends on your location, resources, and philosophy, but ignoring the issue entirely is not an option. One survival skill that's often overlooked is water divining, also known as dowsing. This is the practice of using a forked stick or pair of metal rods to locate underground water sources. It sounds like superstition, and scientists remain skeptical, but there are countless anecdotal accounts of successful water witching from experienced well drillers. The theory is that subtle changes in electromagnetic fields or gravitational pull caused by underground water affect the divining rods, making them move. Whether you believe in it or not, learning the technique costs nothing and could potentially save you thousands of dollars in exploratory drilling if you're searching for water on your land. Even if it's just educated guessing based on topography and vegetation, having multiple methods to locate water increases your chances of success. Now let's get practical about treating water in the field when you don't have access to modern filtration systems. If you're in a survival situation and need to purify water immediately, here's the hierarchy of methods. Boiling is always the gold standard. It kills all pathogens and is foolproof as long as you have a heat source. If you can't boil, chemical treatment is next. Unscented chlorine bleach works well. Use 8 drops per gallon of clear water, 16 drops if the water is cloudy, and let it sit for 30 minutes before drinking. Iodine tablets are another option, available at most outdoor stores, though they leave a chemical taste and aren't recommended for pregnant women or people with thyroid issues. UV light purifiers like the Sterapen can kill bacteria and viruses by disrupting their DNA, but they require batteries and don't work well in murky water. Finally, if you have nothing else, solar disinfection, filling clear plastic bottles with water and leaving them in direct sunlight for 6 to 8 hours, can kill most pathogens through UV radiation and heat. It's not perfect, but it's better than drinking contaminated water straight. Here's something most people miss when planning for drought. Hygiene and sanitation become critical issues when water is scarce. You can't just stop washing your hands, cleaning dishes, or dealing with human waste. These activities require water, and cutting corners leads to disease. During historical droughts and water shortages, outbreaks of dysentery, cholera, and hepatitis have killed more people than dehydration. You need to plan for minimal water hygiene. Hand sanitizer can replace hand washing in many situations. Antibacterial wipes can clean surfaces without water. For dishes, a 3-basin system using minimal water, one for washing, one for rinsing, one for sanitizing with bleach solution, conserves water while maintaining cleanliness. For bathing, sponge baths with a washcloth and a quart of water can keep you reasonably clean. The goal isn't luxury, it's preventing illness that could become life-threatening when medical care is limited. Let's talk numbers about how long you can actually survive without water, because the answer depends on conditions. In a cool, shaded environment with minimal physical activity, a healthy adult might last up to a week without water, though you'd be severely debilitated by day 3. In Texas, summer heat, say 105 degrees with high humidity, you could be dead in 24 hours if you're exerting yourself. Heat exhaustion progresses to heat stroke. Your body temperature spikes, your organs start failing, and that's it. Dehydration symptoms start with thirst and dark urine, progress to dizziness and confusion, and end with organ failure and death. By the time you feel thirsty, you're already slightly dehydrated. By the time your urine is dark amber, you're in trouble. The lesson here is that water isn't something you can procrastinate about. You need to stay ahead of dehydration, drinking regularly even when you don't feel thirsty, and you need to have water secured before the crisis hits. One more reality about Texas droughts: they don't happen in isolation. Drought leads to other cascading failures. Wildfires explode across the dry landscape. consuming homes and forcing evacuations. Agricultural collapse leads to food shortages and price spikes. Power plants that depend on water for cooling can be forced to reduce output or shut down entirely, leading to rolling blackouts during the hottest months when demand is highest. We saw this play out in 2011 when drought and heat waves combined to push the Texas grid to the brink. Economic damage spreads as businesses fail, jobs disappear, and entire communities struggle. If you're preparing for water scarcity, you need to prepare for these secondary effects as well. Food storage, alternative energy, fire protection, these all become part of the same survival equation. So where does all this leave you? If you've made it this far, you're already ahead of 99% of people who think water will just always come out of the tap. The next Texas drought is coming. Maybe not this year, maybe not next, but it's coming. The aquifers are depleting, the climate is shifting, and the infrastructure is aging. When it hits, it will be worse than 2011 because there are more people competing for less water. Your survival depends on what you do right now, today, before the crisis arrives. Start with storage. Get barrels, fill them, treat them, rotate them. Learn to filter and purify water from alternative sources. Install rain catchment if you can. Drill a well or deepen your existing one. Practice water conservation techniques so they become second nature. Build relationships with your neighbors and community so you're not facing the crisis alone. And most importantly, take this seriously. This isn't a hobby or a game, it's life and death. Don't just sit there absorbing information and doing nothing. Act. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, someone living in Texas or anywhere else facing water scarcity. Comment below with your own water prep strategies or questions. Let's build a community of people who are ready for what's coming. Hit that like button if this information was valuable, and if you haven't already, subscribe because we're going to keep delivering the truth that others won't. And if you want to go deeper, you'll find in the pinned comment some guides and documents that can take your preparedness to the next level. Check them out when you're ready. The water crisis is coming. The only question is whether you'll be ready when it does.